Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen have made it to the second round of the French presidential election. It's regarded as the single most important vote in a generation with a potential global impact. Our guest is a French political scientist. Sautedé has been based in the Pearl River Delta over the past 2 decades. Sautedé, thank you very much for joining us. Bienvenue. Welcome to the show.
All right. Thanks for having me.
It was a 4-horse race to a great extent,
right.
Narrowed down, of course, to 2. But the difference between the one who ranked first, Emmanuel Macron, and the fourth, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, was about 4 percentage points.
Yeah.
What does this tell us about what the whole election was about, the first round?
Well, it was very divided. That's the least you can say. So up to the very end, although we had some surveys and polls that had been done actually before the actual vote that indicated that it would be a tie between these 4 candidates. So it would be all of them around 20%, and with margins of error of 1, depending of course on the poll, ranging from 1 to 3.5%. So a lot of people were saying that everything is yet to be decided in the vote itself. But there were some clear indications that Macron still had a lead and Le Pen would come second. So actually it was very close. We knew it would be very close, but at the same time, this time around, the polls
got it right.
Got it very, very right, and were very precise. One of the ones that I've been following really very precisely and still today is the one from the CEVIPOF, which is one of the center of Sciences Po in Paris, and looking at the French political life. And they started a bit less than 2 years ago, a poll with 20,000 people, and now it's 8,000 people. So actually you can look very precisely into what are the intentions.
Now the question is, what about the second round, transfer of votes from those let's say, for instance, right. I think we're talking mostly about François Fillon, right. Mélenchon and Hamon to the second round.
What we can say before we moved even to the second round, also in terms of, so it was a novel also election because for the first time ever, I think it's a journalist from Le Monde who said it's a double 21st of April 2002, meaning that for the first time ever we had the National Front. In the second round, back in 2002, it was not Marine Le Pen, it was Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father. But it came as a shock because one of the big traditional party, one of the 2 parties or the 2 traditional sides that had
parties or the Gaullist center-right?
Exactly, or the Gaullist center-right that had basically alternated in power since 1958, so the beginning of the Fifth Republic. All of a sudden, one was eliminated and was not running for the second round. This time around, both of them are eliminated. So we have actually 2 candidates that are not from the mainstream parties. One, of course, has got some very tight acquaintances with the Socialist Party. He was Minister of the Economy for François Hollande and under Manuel Valls as Prime Minister for 2 full years. So, of course, I mean, he has some acquaintances, but he resigned during the summer 2016 and had created his movement En Marche, so which is not a political party, in April 2016. So to insist on the fact that this is all very novel. And when, as far as Marine Le Pen is concerned, of course, the very fact that she made for the first time ever for the National Front more than 7 million votes in the first round of election is an indication that also she has managed, since she became the head of the party back in 2011, she has managed to what we call de-demonized the party. So basically making
more palatable,
more it's more appealing to a wider range of population, not only the xenophobic, angry, neo-fascist kind of people that could at one point recognize themselves in the father. So the idea was really to expand, to let go with certain vocabulary, to let go officially and upfront with anti-Semitism. So all this has become much more mainstream.
The dispute with her father ended up being somehow instrumental to some.
But this is also, I mean, some people denounce Macron as being a pure marketing product. this is also marketing, because a few weeks or even a few days ago, actually it was shown that the father was still financing the campaign. So he's excluded, but still there, still around. Well, he's not welcome to be too much in front, because especially he keeps...
it's regarded as being too toxic, so to say.
Exactly. He's toxic, and also he's very free. He's a free spirit. And actually, he still commands a lot of respect, well, quotation marks, from this basic or the very well-established electorate that has been supporting the National Front since the 70s.
When we look at the, let's say, we're talking about a very polarized situation,
right,
and we look at, let's say, for instance, Macron, Le Pen and Mélenchon,
right,
to different extent, they regarded, or at least they portrayed themselves as challengers to the establishment.
Yeah.
And if you add it up and you come up with this following conclusion, is that 23 plus 22 is 19. We're talking about, let's say, about 63% voting for these three candidates who portray themselves as challengers.
Right.
Whereas the other two from the traditional center-right and center-left parties only garnered about 27%.
Right. Sure. No, the traditional, especially Hamon, was really, I mean, ended with a bit more than 6%. So for the Socialist Party, the official candidate, and he was also voted and he was actually voted in during a primary. So he was the official candidate. He was at the same time assassinated, of course, matter of speaking, by his own camp, especially with former Prime Minister Manuel Valls deciding to support Macron. So in a way, he really stood almost like no chance, and the Socialist Party really made sure that it would stand no chance, with a lot of betrayal. It was really a story of betrayal. But these people didn't stand a chance in any case, for the simple reason that, as you said, people are amazed, I mean, are tremendously or completely fed up with the system. I think it was, we were reminded several times that at one point the satisfaction rate of our president, François Hollande, was 4%. So this is just the disgust with the system as it exists, and with the capacity of the present parties to solve some of the issues, most of the issues having to do not really with terrorism, which is, of course, the background and something that can be agitated or used, but Fillon tried to use it and it backfired in his face. So the idea that, the traditional right candidate, the idea, I think for people it's much more important to have people would be able to change the system, be true to what so speaking, when they speak about their platform, it's not only a matter of speaking, it's not only a matter of campaigning, it's a matter of doing, and they will be implementing what they promised to do.
And to be regarded as genuine, authentic, and speaking their mind without spinning, that would be also the appeal, let's say, of Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Right. No, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is exactly the same, and these are people who also took their responsibilities. But if you think about it, Benoît Hamon was the same, because Benoît Hamon at one point decided, when he saw that François Hollande, I mean, had completely abandoned the discourse of the Bourget that was very anti-finance system and all that, he decided to resign from the government, so to say, these are not the values I support in a socialist government. So a lot of people were actually critical of these betrayals that were ongoing. But that happened in other governments. But you're right, there is an overall, so hence the people also voting for Mélenchon. I had a lot of my friends, I'm pretty much left-leaning, and I had a lot of my friends who were telling me, I mean, we can only vote one thing, it's Mélenchon. And even abroad, I mean, you saw, I mean, actually his scores abroad, I mean, he did very, very good also, Mélenchon.
And I believe he ranked first among those who were under 24 years old. I'm talking about in France,
exactly,
right?
The electorate. Educated under 24, because if you look at uneducated under 24, they went mostly to Marine Le Pen. And then also people with a bit more means. You had people with less means, of course, who also voted for him. But if you look at between now Macron and Le Pen, who are going to run for the second round, who are going to be present for the second round, she did win. She had a majority with the people who are earning below 1,250 euros a month, whereas he was having the majority, or at least a significant 30%, relative majority, but more than 30% among the people who earn more than 3,000 a month. So you can see this divide. And for Mélenchon, it was also going, actually a lot of people who supported Mélenchon said that as a second choice, they would prefer Marine Le Pen to Fillon.
That leads me to the next. That is a very interesting thing. To the next question, looking ahead to the runoff election, to the second round, would you agree with those who say that, well, basically politics nowadays in Western Europe, in the case of France, would be pretty telling? They would say it's not so much about left versus right, but way more about globalism vis-a-vis nationalism. What's your take on this?
Well, it's clear with the second round that we are going to have. I mean, Macron is all about, he embraces globalization. He wants to open even public tenders to European companies. I mean, it's already the case for certain things, but not for everything, so we want to widen it. He's very, very all his campaign was extremely pro-European. That doesn't mean that he doesn't want to change a few things within Europe. For example, he's all in favor of having a minister of the economy and finance for Europe, so someone will be actually in charge of what makes politics possible, which is the economy, and so they are completely, of course, at the opposite spectrum of our understanding of the world. Whether it should be an open world, so that's Macron, or whether it should be a much more protected with clear-cut borders, getting out of Europe. Even though what Marine Le Pen said, she wouldn't go herself for Brexit. She would organize a referendum. But of course, if she's elected and then she organizes a referendum and she's in favor of breaking away, it's almost like right. Otherwise, she would have almost like to resign right after organizing the referendum if it backfired and the referendum was defeated. So it's really two completely opposite conception of the world, and actually Macron was courageous in that respect, because some people can criticize him, saying, "Oh yes, for the rich and for the urban and for the neolib who are already exactly." So, okay, you can criticize him like that, but at the same time, he was courageous enough to say, "Yes, we are open society. It's not the idea that we have no other choice, but it makes us better." Having Europe makes us better. Being part of the globalized world, being on the winning side, giving people really prospects makes us better. I mean, through these international organizations or regional organizations.
Looking at the bigger picture, and before, we're going to zoom out for a while, right, and then we're going to zoom in again. What sort of similarities and comparisons would you draw between what's at stake here, let's say, compared with the US election and with the Brexit referendum? Well, with the Brexit, it's difficult to say. I'm talking about because of the issue of globalization versus protectionism. Versus protectionism, versus inward-looking, being more introvert and all that. I don't think that the Brits don't see themselves as Brexit. They see it as an opportunity to become globalized without having their strings attached and hands tied. So they don't see it really as a return to protectionism. On the contrary, they see it as less regulation. They see actually, or they saw, but they are going to see later on, because it takes at least 2 years to get out, that less regulations might not be that beneficial. But that's another issue. So I wouldn't really put it on the same level. For Trump, this is clearly, I mean, and we've seen a lot of commonalities between Trump and Marine Le Pen. For Macron, I mean, they are really world apart, right? And actually Macron is a great admirer of Obama, and I think they had some talks and stuff. So it's not really at all the kind of person he would emulate. And so even though there are some elements of populism, so we could characterize it also as a populist candidate for Macron. What is Marine Le Pen? What is Trump? That would be a sort of populism from the center, if exactly, so to say, which is because one of the possible definition of populism is, of course, being a catch-all party and appealing directly to the desire of the populace, right, of the citizens for that matter.
So in that regard, Macron is definitely a populist, and by being catch-all and by also appealing to everybody and just like having all these clients and trying to satisfy everybody at the same time. Also having this direct contact because he doesn't have a political movement or political party. He has a movement but not a political party. And he also said that for the legislative election that we will have in June, so following the presidential election, so second round for the presidential election, 7th of May, and then in June we have 2 rounds for legislative election. Well, it's first past the
first past the post.
Yeah, first past the post. So it's not at all a proportional voting. So in that, for that, he has promised that nobody from any party could run for him. For En Marche, so you would have not to be from a party, and also that at least half of the people running would need to be from the civil society. And actually, some of them have already been decided. Some of them come from established parties, but there were people who were always like a bit at the fringe, or a bit challenging. And some of them, I mean, go for sure defeat, actually, if you look at the details. But some others will be really coming from the civil society, and he reserved himself the right, of course, to pick up people and to widen even the appeal after the result, of course, of the second round.
Looking at the second round and going back to the issue of what can we say about transfer of votes?
Right.
Let's look at Fillon,
Sure.
And then, of course...
But all these leaders have been very clear. Fillon immediately said we need to block the National Front. What I was really appreciative of is the fact that for the first time, and contrary to 2002, it was not, the mood was not to say we need to block barriers or kind of unadmissible or even unspeakable possibility of having the National Front, as if it was clearly exactly the same thing as the National Socialist Party, as if it was Nazi Germany. I think this time around it was much more. This party has become, of course. You have an electorate behind it. More than 7 million people have voted in favor of Marine Le Pen. You cannot disrespect that.
You cannot label them as a basket of deplorables.
Exactly. You cannot say you are a bunch of low education fascists who have absolutely no clue of what is good for you. You cannot say that. This is
that backfires,
that backfired badly. And the idea, first of all, from a human point of view, it's a mistake. And that was always a mistake. That was one of the main mistakes, I think, of the Socialist Party. The other mistake was to say we can find an arrangement that was coming from the right-wing party, traditional right-wing party. You had people at the end of the 90s who didn't hesitate to coin some agreements with the more palatable elements of the party, leaving aside, of course, the more what they characterize as fascists, but at the time they didn't call them fascists. So now really the position is clear, is to say the agenda is wrong. This is based on, look at what they've done in some municipalities, because since 2014, let's face it, the National Front is the first party of France. People don't realize that. But in terms of electorate, as one single party, since the European election in 2014 and after with the municipal election in 2015, this is the first party in France. So you cannot say to the people, oh, come on, you don't account for much, you are despicable, we don't want to have anything to do with you. So the idea is, of course, we need to engage the electorate, we need to talk to them, all the candidates, and so I think they've been very careful. Fillon, not yet Mélenchon, but Mélenchon, a lot of people are also saying Mélenchon was not clear.
Is he being ambiguous?
Yeah, that he was being ambiguous. This is not my reading. When someone with his career, with his path, says, I will let you vote in conscience, his conscience is for Macron.
Actually, back in 2002, he was among those on the front line calling for a vote for Chirac against Le Pen, father.
Yeah, but that was a different time, and at the time he didn't have any hope, to play a role. I think for him now it's also to say there was a momentum behind me of people who are fed up with the system. So how can I tell these people. Now I'm ordering you
Vote for the candidate, the so-called, as they regard him, the neoliberal kind of guy.
So by saying, according to your conscience, we know very well that he has absolutely, he was actually, he ran against Marine Le Pen in Hénin-Beaumont himself. So there is no ambiguity. I mean, if you want really, so people who are trying to stir up a controversy are just like, I think it's not fair. But of course, Hamon immediately said that his electorate should transfer their vote, and he would vote himself for Macron. So this is, I mean, really a big chunk of the electorate, and clearly majority. All the expectations, all the pollings gives a 62% against 38% for Marine Le Pen. But one of the things that will be crucial is what we call differential abstention. So differential abstention is the idea that abstention will not be the same with the electorate that can potentially back Macron and with the electorate that will potentially back Marine Le Pen.
Issues of loyalty and determination,
exactly.
Right?
Issues of loyalty, issues of mobilization. So these people will go and vote. And I can tell you, apart from these projections that are made, I have a lot of these same friends who voted for Mélenchon who told me, what should we do second round? I can only abstain. So you would have a pretty high rate of abstention. Abstention for the first round was not that high. I mean, actually it was pretty close to the election participation in close to 78%, so close to 2012. The only time where it was really low was back in 2002 when Jean-Marie Le Pen made it to the second round. But this time around, even with a high participation, so 78%, about 78%, 77.7%, Marine Le Pen didn't make it to the second round. So, of course, there is always the possibility, if you have, like, for example, abstention up to 63-64%, or participation, sorry, up to 63-64% for Macron, and against 80-85% for Marine Le Pen, well, it's purely mathematical. There is a small chance that she might make it,
for victory,
even with a low number of 10 million voters in her favor out of 47 million registered voters.
Talking about participation, you were very much involved in the very first Macau polling station, which in the election last Sunday. What can you tell us about it and the participation rate, and also of your?
Well, I mean, first of all, let me just say that was the idea of the present Consul General, so Eric Berty. I think this is important to stress because this is the idea, for these elections, also to bring the community together, to give the possibility to vote and all that. Of course, we approached the local authorities, Macau authorities, to have their authorization to organize such a poll on the ACR territory. And so for that, I'm really thankful to all the authorities. All the people who voted, everybody was saying that this is so great, this is consideration for us and all that. Of course, I was a bit disappointed by the participation rate because we managed to get only 48%, whereas in Hong Kong it was close to 66%. So very high. Hong Kong is always more than 60%, higher than the usual for French living abroad. But if you look at the rate for French living abroad, it's 44%. So Macau was higher. So I'm happy about that. Ultimately, I mean, this is only 66 people voting in the end, so 137 registered voters, 66 people who casted their vote. Of course, I mean, it's a reflection of our community, but I think it was overall a good exercise. People were curious. I could see some families. For example, there is one family who have kids from here, from Macau, and they were happy to show them how a vote would take place and how it works and what's the secrecy of the ballot and so on and so forth. So I think it has also educational purpose, and it was important. I mean, for me, I found it very interesting. So I'm happy that we will have again a second round and legislative election also in Macau.
Mm-hmm. And now, still looking at the whole situation from the lenses of Macau and Hong Kong resident, which you are, of both SARs, and also of China's SARs.
Yeah.
future relations between France and China and Macau and Hong Kong, depending on whether we have Macron or Le Pen. What would you like to share with us?
It's difficult to say because in terms of Macron is very pro-business in a way, pro-international organization. He's much more pro-Atlantic or pro-American than, of course, Le Pen is. Le Pen has already characterized Vladimir Putin as a good friend. He is still very supportive of her. So, of course, it gives a different outlook of our general foreign policy. Mm-hmm. When it comes to China, they haven't really said much. I mean, first of all, because it doesn't really matter. I'm not saying that China doesn't matter. China does matter a lot, but it's
not like what you have in the United States. China is always a big issue in the U.S. election.
Issue, but you could see Trump. I mean, there were even some videos on YouTube saying China, 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 and I mean, being kind of very, very negative about especially the trade deficit.
Now there is mending ties.
And now that's they are best buddies with President Xi Jinping. So I'm using the vocabulary of President Trump, of course. So it's it's difficult to fathom, and I'm pretty sure that when you are in power, then reality kicks back, and whatever you say, well, she wants to keep the job in France, give the priority to French nationals. Yet at the same time, you've got more than 2 million French living abroad, and who make it, and also working in China. A lot of people, a lot of French nationals in Shanghai. So what are you going to say? We don't want any immigration. We block immigration to 10,000 people a year, where immigration has already been reined in for the past 30 years. Actually, immigration is very, very tightly regulated in France. It's 200,000 people a year, people we welcome because of international treaties, because of our engagement with families, also because of administrative and civic law. So it's this cannot be changed that easily. But we live in an interdependent world, and of course, with Macron, it will be immediately acknowledged. With Le Pen, it might take a few weeks, but it will be also acknowledged.
And a few weeks, as you were pointing out, and this is leads me to the last question, there will be the legislative elections. Right. And you were already hinting at the challenges that Macron will face to have a majority in the parliament. Right. What about Le Pen? Because how many lawmakers have we got from National Front? Because of the first past the post system, only 2, right?
Yeah. But this time around, because of course we will have a lot of divisions, right? So she might stand, and they can stand a better chance if there is a triangular election. Then, if we have a triangular election, so if people don't desist or don't say for the second round, I'm not running. This time around, we will have, because it's possible for the legislative election, people who came in first, the first 2, are not the only ones staying. Everybody can stay, actually, if you go beyond a certain threshold. So very often when you have triangular, this benefits the National Front. And there will be a lot of triangular votes for these legislative elections. Also, what we thought was not possible was, of course, the outlook was change in 2015 with the local elections, whereas, as I was saying earlier, Le Pen's party became the first party in France, and you had more than 1,600 from the National Front being elected as in councils for departments and regions. So, and actually it's quite a lot. All of them have resigned since then from the party. They've stayed on the job, but they've resigned from National Front because they were slightly connected, or they were pretty remote from the party, and actually it was just for them a strategy to get elected. But still, and both of them truly believe that there is a momentum that is created, which is true, that is created by the presidential election first.
Which is translated into the legislative one. It happened with the Hollande and the Socialist Party 5 years ago. Right?
Exactly. And this is the idea that it's almost automatic, and it goes along with the idea that we have of our system, which is a semi-presidential system. So in the end,
there will be cohabitation, as maybe.
You can no. It's very difficult for the first. the immediate first mandate.
To have this kind of
It happened to Mitterrand, but that was a few years into his mandate, so that was actually 5 years in the mandate, and so he had still 2 years to serve. And it happened to Chirac because he was too confident that he could even have a bigger majority, so that was a big mistake. He was pushed by that by Villepin at the time. It was a big mistake in 1997 to say, yeah, let's have a wider majority, and actually they lost their majority.
Jospin became the prime minister.
So they became the prime minister, and we have the longest cohabitation of 5 years, from 1997 to 2002. But no, if I truly believe that there will be this momentum, and the two candidates believe that there will be this momentum. That's why some constitutional law specialists in France says, well, you don't need to go really for the Sixth Republic. What you need to do is organize, for example, the legislative election before the presidential election. And then it already changed the game, because then you need to build majorities. You might have coalitions just like what you have in Germany, and so on and so forth. So it would give a different outlook.
But you have the so-called Republican Pact against Le Pen and against National Front.
Right.
All against
Republican
Le Pen
front, yeah.
or Republican Front. Everything or everyone but Le Pen. Whereas, of course, Macron potentially could manage to get the support from other center-left or center-right parties surrounding the En Marche movement.
Right. But it's not the same. I mean, it holds when you have only two candidates. So one is to be defeated against the other. When you have triangular, you still think that you might make it. And here, they don't have the choice. I mean, Mélenchon might have, if it was possible by law, I'm pretty sure, given the fact that he was so reluctant to immediately appeal to his electorate and say, well, vote for Macron immediately and all that, I'm pretty sure that he would have loved to stay for the second round, I mean, if it was possible by law. And this is, so just to tell you that this is possible for the legislative election. So the one who comes in third can stay.
Well, in the meantime, we'll have to wait for what happens on the 7th of May, the second round of the presidential election. Eric Sautedé, thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
All right. Always a pleasure to come.
Thank you so much. And to you at home, thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.